All right. Hello, Culver City. My name is Freddy Puza, and I'm running for Culver City Council this November 3rd. We are 52 days away from Election Day. Also, I want to point out that early voting and vote by mail starts on October 5th. So be on the lookout for those ballots. And if you do vote by mail, it's recommended that you mail it in early, given what's happening with the U.S. Postal Service. Part of why I'm running is I feel like I have the skill set to navigate change during this historic moment. And I do feel like there's significant change in the air. A listener and a community builder who brings people together to have difficult conversations and accomplish goals. Today, I'm bringing people together to talk about small businesses and the creative economy in the age of COVID. We are in month 6 of the pandemic, although in my mind, it still feels like March. Culver City and surrounding municipalities have taken severe cuts to their budget. Small businesses are struggling to survive. I listened to a story on NPR yesterday about a small business owner who runs a nail salon, and what she has to do to make her business run. And she's described basically the clinical cleaning that she has to do and the stringent practices to provide the services. And she's barely just able to make the rent, much less money for food for her family. So she's actually having to take on a second job. The entertainment industry in the beginning all but shut down. I have a friend who is a producer in the entertainment industry, and I hear about his struggles about how to make productions happen again, given all the testing, and all of the regulations, much needed regulations, and we do need to have these. So with no end in sight, I wanted to dive into a conversation with leaders who are really connected to these issues. I hope we can more fully understand these issues, think of the blind spots and the nuances and ways to move forward. So I'd like to now introduce our panel of speakers today. Very excited for them. Please welcome first Christina Davis. Christina is a powerhouse. Some people run at 80, 90%. Christina runs at 150%. She gets things done. She cares about people as well. She began her career, she's the president and CEO of the LAX Coastal Chamber of Commerce. She began that job in 2004, and in 2006, she stepped up as the president and CEO. During her time as president, she has grown the chamber budget by increasing membership and developing robust programming. Today, the chamber represents over 600 local businesses in the communities of Westchester, Marina del Rey, Playa del Rey, Playa Vista, and Del Rey. Next, I'd like to introduce Darlene Fukuji. Darlene is an idea machine. Whenever I talk to her, she has 1,000,001 ideas, and she thinks about, have you thought about it from this angle? Have you thought about this? Have you looked at it from every side? I appreciate that about her. She's the associate director of LMU's Fred Kiesner Center for Entrepreneurship and the immediate past president of the Westchester Rotary Club, of which I'm a member. Prior to LMU, she was an engagement manager at Growth Think, a consulting and investment banking firm for entrepreneurs, where she helped over 250 companies start, grow, or exit. She has a passion for startups, education, socially responsible businesses, and problem solving to make the world a better place. She has her bachelor's degree in entrepreneurship, and she just finished her executive MBA. Congratulations to you. Next, I'd like to introduce Len Dichter. He is an award-winning creative director, commercial documentary director, and writer. He's the co-founder of A Very Good Agency, an independent creative agency and production company focused on elevating the reach of socially conscious clients, and is a consulting creative director for the Los Angeles advertising agency Sagan Fior. He's also the vice chair of the Culver City Cultural Affairs Commission. And last, but certainly not least, Jeff Schwartz. He's very active in Culver City. He's so smart and thoughtful in advocating progressive values. Jeff is a working musician, published author, and first vice president of the Culver City Democratic Club. He has a PhD in American Studies and works as a reference librarian at the Santa Monica Public Library, where for the last 5 years, he created and ran the Sound Waves New Music series. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So let's get into this conversation. The first thing I want to, the first question I have for everyone is, Culver City is heavily reliant on sales tax. Due to COVID, the city took a 25% decrease in sales tax. There was also a 50% decrease in our TOT, transit-oriented tax, and business license tax. So how can Culver City help support our small businesses in general, and also especially during this pandemic?
I'm happy to begin. Right now, one of the things I think that as local community members that we need to really think about is supporting local. Supporting our small local businesses, making sure that we're patronizing our favorite restaurants, making sure that we're, shopping at our local stores, because they really are the people that give back to the community as well. And they are struggling right now. And there's very few industries that I'm working with that are actually thriving in this pandemic. So every little bit counts. And I think also from a morale standpoint, reaching out to your small businesses and letting them know that we are in this together, I think is really critical right now. So we will support locally to heal globally. And I think each one of us can just do that in our own backyards.
And I would also add to that, I mean, specific to Culver City, we have in our creative economy, we have a wealth of different business types, organization types. And I think it's a very smart move on Culver City's part to continue to reach out to them, not just to kind of establish basic contact, but actually bring city and business together in impactful ways. We have an economic recovery task force that the city's had now for several months. And one of the things I'm happy to see is that rather than just reaching out to members of the community, which is also important, they're actually reaching out to business leaders, and they're not just relying on the large corporate presence, right? I mean, we have Apple and HBO and Amazon, that's all great. Most of those offices are actually empty. But at a small to medium-sized business, you have people in there working every day in individual smaller teams, et cetera. So they're on the ground, they're in Culver City, they're working locally and they're buying locally. And I would also argue that in some respects, they have perhaps even a deeper stake in our economic recovery, because if Culver City were to suffer, their business would suffer too. So more opportunity for city and business to work together in partnership, to really spark ideas, to really, provide innovation and provide that throughput of dialogue. It's not just going to help us weather this crisis. I think it's going to make for a stronger city even out of this crisis, because we're going to be more fully aligned and more fully supported.
If I could add to what Len just said, I think this city has been doing some great partnerships with businesses for the outdoor dining programs and the Feed Culver program to keep local restaurants in business, to cook for people who are having trouble providing for themselves, and to use sidewalk and parking space to allow them to expand their outdoor dining. And yeah, I think more creative uses of public space for, retail and other businesses will hopefully help us get through this thing a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think it's always good to think of things short-term and long-term. And short-term solutions are always good to support local businesses, and I think most importantly, staying home if you feel sick. It's such an obvious thing, but sometimes we forget it, and I'm out and I'm seeing people who are sick, and it drives us crazy. But I think long-term, continuing to support local, but building relationships and getting to know your community so that when crisis happens, we know how to best support each other as a strong community. And I think the mutual aid networks that formed during this time is a testament to how before COVID that was kind of lacking. We always were about strong communities, but even now more than ever, we really think about the relationships in our community and how we can support our families in different ways and how we can support. I know Culver City has a lot of family businesses. So how can we build that family-like environment in our society? And I know that it takes time and there's growing pains to do that. And it takes a strong leader to be able to facilitate that. So breaking up short-term and long-term, I think, is a good approach.
Thank you for that. I really love all the relationship building and communication between city government and small businesses, and how important and how valuable that is. And if it takes a pandemic to increase that and look at that long term, so be it. The next question, thinking about, short term and long term, what businesses are most vulnerable to closing down permanently? And in what areas are there significant growth? Do you see kind of this, increase?
I'm happy to go first. So definitely our small business community, I think, is really important. And you can dissect it into sectors: hospitality, luxury services, personal care. You talk about the hair salons, the nail salons. I think there were a lot of obstacles they had to overcome this year already with some of the legislation that came out, and then couple that with a pandemic and making sure that they can open safely. I think there were a lot of issues that revolved around that. The restaurant industry, they operate on such small margins. So, when they shut down, some of them don't have the ability to go out to alfresco dining and have the curbside. They weren't set up for that. And so I think that really supporting those businesses, those very small mom and pop businesses, our small businesses are the backbone of our local economies. So there are so many that were affected by this. Who is doing well, as part of your question? I've heard health and wellness, home improvement, just kicking butt right now. So I think that there are some industries that really are surviving. People that were in, e-commerce, definitely lots of people are doing very well right now as well. So I want to make sure that there's balance, but supporting really the smallest of the business, the mom and pops, I think is really what's critical.
And I think we have, one advantage we have in Culver City, we're the heart of Screenland, or some now say the heart of Streamland, is that we have a heavy film production media base. And, production is it's nearly pandemic proof, in the sense that motion picture, television, branded content, streaming content, continues, and it's now needed more than ever. More people are at home and are consuming entertainment at home. So to that extent, we're fortunate, but it's critical to keep in mind that, the way that our creative economy works is it's because of that base that our restaurants, our hospitality, our retail thrives. We have, without our business-based creative economic base, we will not have nearly the range, the diversity, or number of retail restaurant establishments. And so, of course, they're feeling the effect not just from consumers stepping back, but the fact that the offices and the businesses are empty or emptier than they used to be. And that could potentially be a longer term trend. Post-pandemic, we're going to see different forms of officing and networking and such. But again, when you look after your creative economy, you're not just looking after those businesses and organizations, you're also looking after all of the other types of businesses that depend on that strong economy. I mean, it's like, a comparison would be, in an industrial sense, the Ford Motor Company, is there because Ford is there. All of these ancillary, auxiliary, other types of businesses kind of go around it and create an ecosystem. It's the same that we have in Culver City. The difference is that we're not industrial, we're more information digital based, which means that what's here can go away a lot more quickly than if you were relying on a factory or a power plant, which is all the more reason for city and private industry, private business, and education and arts to work together in common cause. Because the deeper you make those, the more tightly you forge those bonds, then the better chance you have of weathering this together and making sure that we lose as few businesses as possible, which will also mean we'll lose fewer businesses in the retail hospitality, restaurant, entertainment sector.
Yeah, I think something that, were you going to say something, Darlene?
No, I was just going to add, like, I think both Christina and Len did a great job of identifying the types of businesses. And I think a common theme that we're seeing is significant growth in tech and our reliance on that and using that as more of a partner to create solutions across every industry. And also the importance of healthcare and putting our health first is so important. And I won't dive too much into it, but especially mental health during this time. And as we look at those most vulnerable populations and industries, we also have to look at some of the nonprofits that provided a lot of our social services in areas that we didn't even know that they were operating until they're gone. So those are just a few things that, thinking about as we move forward.
I'd also like to add a little bit about the role of freelancers in the creative economy, people who, do not have paid sick leave, et cetera, whether they're, musicians or graphic designers or actors, or, I mean, everyone is in the gig economy now, but, these are people who are talking about gigs, yeah, I mean, when we talk about small businesses, a lot of these people are sort of individual businesses themselves, freelancers. And I don't know what else I have to say about this, except, I sort of move in the, freelance musician world a little bit, and these people were very stressed out. I mean, it's always a precarious lifestyle, and then AB5 made things a lot more difficult for them. And now there's just no work. You're trying to put together, an income from a bunch of part-time gigs and, sessions, and then none of those things happen anymore. And it's hard to think about how that's going to come back. That will come back a lot more slowly, but we can come back to this. I just want to put it in the mix.
No, let's get into it. We do have a big, as Len pointed out, as you're talking about, we do have a big creative economy in Culver City. And, the creative industry reaches anything from the entertainment industry to marketing, and has a wide range of employment that is included in that. It also, it makes 14.4% of employment across all industries in Culver City are in the creative economy. Now, this is much larger than LA County, LA City, which is impressive. It's a quarter of our city's GDP. And so, and maybe Len and Jeff and whoever can talk this, but Len, you recently actually shared a presentation to Culver City Council as a vice chair of the Cultural Affairs Commission. Would you share a little bit about that proposal
Sure.
that you shared, and what are the next steps about that?
Sure. So, I mean, this goes back in 2014, we, as a Cultural Affairs Commission, began to, and my predecessor on the commission, Marla Kusid, was really the one that looked at the Otis reports on the creative economy that Otis College has done for well over, I guess we're going about 15 years with the LA Economic Development Corporation, and brought to the commission and the city the idea that, we really need to look at we need to document our creative economy, because, some will disagree with me, but I believe history shows that our creative economy, I mean, Culver City was founded as an alternative to Hollywood. We were founded as a motion picture center. So we've always been a creative economy. But when we went through redevelopment in the 90s and early 2000s, we discovered there was a sort of a happy accident that happened, was that, because of that retail-based redevelopment, it burnished Culver City's reputation. We had Sony, we had the Culver studio. That was enough to start attracting, we were inexpensive. At that time, getting your foot in the door as a business person in Culver City was not terribly expensive compared to the rest of the West Side. So we grew a very vital creative economy base, and we stretched it beyond film production into communication, media, advertising, marketing, post-production, effects, elements of fashion, as well as a strong freelance base as well, to Jeff's point, which is very important. But there wasn't really a lot of guidance in terms of, I would argue with a predecessor at our Chamber of Commerce that he would say, well, creativity is the cherry on the cake. And we wanted to show, well, we think it's it's a big slice of this cake, So let's get away from this definition of arts and culture just in a performing arts. Let's start talking about arts and culture in a business standpoint. Let's start talking about it in an economic standpoint. What do we have? And how do we protect it? And how do we grow it? How do we help council members, like I hope you're going to be soon, make more informed decisions on how to guide our creative economic base, because they are a little different than a lot of other industries. So with Otis and the LADC, we produced this landmark report, and we showed that over a third of our GDP comes from creative organizations and businesses. So we're actually a third of the cake. And then the question became, now that we have this information, what do we do with it? So our latest report was us going into the community, pulling together key stakeholders in business, arts, education, nonprofit. And the three things that came out of this, which I think were fundamental, is they talked about access, connectivity, and opportunity. They wanted more access to city. They wanted more, and especially in light of these big multinational corporations coming in, HBO, that's all great, but there's also a fear factor that the city's gonna pivot to the needs of these few corporations, and they're going to start to ignore or sideline the needs of small to medium size. And when I say small to medium, I'm not talking about mom and pop shops. I'm still talking about multi-million-dollar businesses, but they're just smaller than, HBO. So they want more access to the city, and they want a fair playing field for how the city deals with them. They want to be connected. They want to be networked together. Most of our creative economy sits behind locked doors, with security systems, because a lot of the work they do is sensitive. They don't get a chance to go out and meet each other. But when you bring creative people together in a room or in an event, or you bring them together in common cause, ideas starts to happen, inspiration starts to happen. They start to feel connected to each other. And then the last thing is they want equal opportunity, in the sense that, they want to be able to grow with Culver City, not get shut out because of our growth. And so when we brought this to council just a couple weeks ago, they heard it, which was good. And now we're moving on a couple different fronts with this. We're now working with our economic recovery task force, to make sure that our creative economy is not just represented, but thought about in that discussion. And again, let's start bringing in members of our creative economy into that initiative. But we're also undergoing our first general plan transformation in 20-something years. So from that sort of immediate short-term level that Darlene was talking about, to that longer-term vision level, how do we bake an informed understanding of our creative economy into our general plan, their needs, their desires, their wants? How do we make sure that we do not put all of our eggs in the basket of a few large corporations that, while it's super cool to have them here, are really just tenants? They're signing 3 to 5 year leases, 10-year leases. And how do we bring them into the discussion, but also all of our other creative economy stakeholders into that conversation? And how do we make sure that we're going to grow, that knowing that what we had before was a little bit of a happy accident? How do we do this now with more intent, through policy, through programming, through partnerships, and even through the way the city presents itself, that we're a true lasting economic center? And when the next recession comes, or God forbid a pandemic, or a creative business just happens to see it's cheaper to move outside of Culver City, they're going to think twice, because the entire body, the depth of what they get from Culver City is actually worth more to them than saving some money on real estate. That's what we're trying to do.
I love that. And instead, it's not in opposition to all these companies moving in, but it's how do we leverage the existing businesses that we have, build relationships, build community, which is going to lift the whole city up.
Yeah, and I'll give you a very quick case in point on this. There was a council member who, when presented with this, started to talk about, that they're hopeful that Amazon and HBO and Apple, that they're going to give to arts and culture. Well, they will. It's called corporate social responsibility. They've all got it in their budgets. That's fine. And that's good. They're also they might want some quid pro quo with that. As long as it's legal, it's all fine. You know, we help you, you help us. That's the way corporations operate. Just don't count on it. Just don't assume that because we're lucky enough at this moment to have some very large corporations here, that their largesse is what's going to protect us and feed us and water us. Look at our entire creative community. That's businesses, that's nonprofits, that's working artists, that's freelancers. Engage everyone. Do not just play to those who have the largest offices or the deepest accounts, because if you do that, you're going to run the risk of isolating everyone else, and you're going to become dependent on corporate on corporate largesse, and that's a dangerous proposition for anyone.
Yeah, well, you also touched upon the general plan, which I am an advisory committee member, and we discussed the creative economy recently, and Jeff Schwartz gave this great, thoughtful public comment about the creative economy, which really pulled out the individual artists and musicians, and he talked about displacement. Also, I love part of what he talked about was reimagining public spaces, to host venues, to really use those spaces and maximize them. They're public spaces, so using them for that purpose, which it can include all these artistic performances to give people a platform to do this in a usually free space. But Jeff, do you want to comment about this wonderful comment that you made?
Well, sure. I mean, I kind of thought we were going to be here to say nice things about you, but
no, I would love to. No, I will. This is about information sharing and.
Well, again, maybe I can kind of connect that back to what Len was talking about. I was thinking about the Helms Bakery and the Hayden Tract as situations in where really kind of not exciting areas, a vacant bakery and a sort of basic warehouse district were transformed by creative developers into these sorts of hubs with great shopping and great interesting businesses and all of those things. They become neighborhoods, when before they were these sort of, especially the Hayden Tract, was just sort of a blank. And that can be the kind of, well, possibly connected space, right? That it's not easily replaceable, like you can, because they're around each other. Being part of a community is valuable, whether it's community businesses or it becomes a neighborhood. And then it's like, well, yeah, we could get a box in Irvine for less than a box in Culver City, but we're part of this fabulous neighborhood in Culver City. But the thing I wrote to the GPAC about was this sort of historically difficult relationship between the creative economy and the fine arts, I guess you could say. That I think about, Richard Florida's idea of the creative class, and that from the early part of the millennium, right, where he wrote that because tech didn't need to be in a specific place, because it didn't need to ship a product the way you needed to ship coal or cars or planes, a software company could be based absolutely anywhere. So then they would choose based on how cool the places were. Because you want the best people, you want to be someplace where the best people want to live. You want to be in San Francisco or Austin or Culver City. But then when those people come to those neighborhoods and all this money and all this venture capital comes to this neighborhood, it drives up the rents. And then the people who made those places cool, the musicians, the weirdos, are pushed out to, Oakland or Sacramento or Lancaster or wherever. And that this just seems to be a cycle. And how can we have this development without displacement? You know, is the zillion-dollar question, right? And some of that displacement is just fashion, like, oh, Silver Lake's not cool anymore, Culver City's cool now. But some of it is this economic, you know, wheel. It's hard to talk about, you know, we start out talking about art and we end up talking about real estate all the time.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and so much of the themes I'm hearing are the interconnectedness of everything that's going on, and we're really realizing how dependent we are on each other, interdependent on each other, and just how creativity flows through everything, whether it is art or whether it's real estate or whatever you're doing. We have to bring creativity right now and innovation. Entrepreneurs are known for taking great risks and finding opportunities when others can't see them. Darlene, how's the entrepreneur community responding to current times, and what do you see as emerging as trends or opportunities? And anyone can answer as well, but Darlene first, please.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing a lot more of is innovation competitions around COVID-19. Ran one this summer with high school students from across the country. And I'm also doing one in collaboration with Techstars and Google for Entrepreneurs, which really supports up and coming entrepreneurs and leaders. And I wanted to, you know, really emphasize that what I'm seeing is, you know, whenever there's a crisis, there's usually, it means a catalyst for change or for a renewing of things. So I think we have to always look at the entrepreneurial mindset, and that can happen within companies. That always happens in the creative industry. You're always having to make something out of nothing a lot of times and be really creative and resourceful. So I'm seeing a lot of that. Like, we all are creatives at our core. Like, we all are creative in different ways, and entrepreneurs tend to use business, and I see this next generation of entrepreneurs as using business as a force for doing good in our community, especially with social and environmental changes. So that's what I'm seeing in the startup world, and then what I'm seeing, because we have so many entrepreneurial-minded people in corporations and in bigger businesses, that the greater need and emphasis for sustainability and resilience plans is so necessary, because we always are going to be going through change. And I think there's sometimes a little stigma about the word entrepreneur. People think that entrepreneurship means big money, big VC money. And part of my mission at LMU and our Entrepreneurship Center is to create that next generation of socially responsible companies that are looking for the long-term goal and future, not just looking for some of those quick exits, but are building mission-driven companies that are solving social problems and working with stakeholders all across the board. And people forget that the word entrepreneur is a French word meaning to undertake. And I want to emphasize one as like an undertaker versus one to make money. And we forget that Mother Teresa is a great entrepreneur. She did so much good and she impacted the world in so many ways with such little resources. And that, I think, is one of the most important things to realize is when supporting entrepreneurs, it's not just supporting them to make money. We're looking at training the next generation of entrepreneurs to solve world problems and to take on complex situations. I mean, my goal is to support the next generation of entrepreneurs. And Fred Puza knows day in and day out of how many different even students are coming into LMU from all across the world, participating in our nationally ranked entrepreneurship program that really teaches about proactivity, responding versus reacting to situations, innovation. And there's so many different types of innovation. It doesn't mean just product. There's innovation in processes or in marketing, and that's where the creative economy comes in. And when there's true partnership in that, businesses do well when there's great partnership. And and even persistence. So we're seeing, continue those entrepreneurs that continue to fight the good fight and adapt to this changing world. And we are learning a lot from each other, because now more than ever, we're able to connect and learn from each other globally without having to use so much resources for travel. So the entrepreneurship community is learning a lot from each other all across the world. And I'll never forget when I visited the Stoneview Nature Center, that it reminded me that all roads lead to Culver City. And so I think Freddy Puza has a great opportunity to make sure that all of our roads and infrastructure within Los Angeles, that make sure that Culver City is that hub to support our greater economy as well. Sorry, I went off on a tangent, but really passionate about all of this, and thank you for the opportunity.
That was wonderful, Darlene. Thank you. Actually, Fred, the last few calls I've had this week, I've been getting a lot of calls from people that have either been displaced from their job or have been furloughed. And it's amazing how crisis really does breed entrepreneurs. So many people thinking creatively about, maybe they were on the hamster wheel of business working in corporate America, and now they've been downsized. And now they're like, well, wait a minute, I've always wanted to do whatever that is. And so they start to think entrepreneurial about how I can launch my business. And even the students that come out of LMU, I've gotten a few calls from students saying, I just graduated and how am I going to get a job? I don't think I'm going to, but I have an idea that I think could be really either help people. I mean, they're just problem solving. And so, I think that we saw it in the recession. After the recession, how many people that were unemployed moved into starting their own business. I think pandemic and crisis really does open up people's mind to survival, going after a dream. They've got nothing to lose. And I think it's an opportunity. And so many people look at it as that. So I think, while this is a terrible time, I think there are some really amazing things that will come out of this. And I think that, going back to collaborating, chambers of commerce, organizations like LMU, mentors within each industry. I think it's up to us to really make sure that we're reaching out and connecting these people to the resources they need to follow their dream and connect to the government, connect to, power partners. I think that we all play a role in supporting our business community.
And if I could just, I think these comments are these are so crucial. They're crucial all the time, but they're especially crucial now, as was pointed out. We're going to see a more rapid shift to the entrepreneurial class. Out of tragedy does breed opportunity, and there are fantastic opportunities for strong, talented people to go their own way. But they need access. They need access to resources. They need access to capital, access to real estate, and they need access. They would benefit from access to local governments, as well as chambers of commerce and other organizations and entities that are going to give them a place, that are going to help them kind of realize their dream. A key part of what we're trying to do, at least with our work at the commission level with creative economy, is to basically say this: that if you just leave it up to the private sector, you're going to end up at lobbying. You'll just end up with lots and lots of lobbying. And lobbying is not the same as creating an equal playing field for all entrants. But if you do it right, and I think Culver City is so well positioned for this because we're an incorporated city, 40,000 people. We're a dynamic city. And so our government and our different business and organizational communities, they can work together. We can offer a more level playing field. It's great that we have Apple here, but it's going to be so much more valuable to us to have the next Apple here, to have the next 3 Apples here. But to do that, you have to invest in entrepreneurialism. You have to invest in small independent businesses, and you have to, and we're on the West Side, and our real estate's expensive, and this, that, the other. But there are ways that local government can certainly help to aid that process. And in doing so, they're going to create a greater sense of transparency, a greater sense of cohesiveness. If a small business person, entrepreneur wants to step in, to be able to plug them into a like-minded community of creators is huge. Few other cities can do that in an effective way. And we can do it in a transparent way. And again, we can do it in a way that won't just benefit the entrepreneur, but will benefit city revenue, taxation, employment. It creates opportunity for everybody. I mean, and again, I think it's great that we have some large corporate presences here, but how many jobs are they really going to create for Culver City residents? No one's able to define what's the net benefit of having this corporation here. There will be some for sure, but I believe it's through the entrepreneurial class, it's through the next generation of business leaders that we're going to be able to grow our entire economy in a really transcendent, more permanent way. And I hope that we're able to continue to have this conversation at a city level, because I think it's going to be fundamental to our future and the future of all the other businesses that depend on us having a strong creative economy base.
Thank you for those thoughts. Be mindful of time, we're gonna wrap it up with a two-question ending. I don't think we're ever gonna go back to whatever normal was before. So how will what's one thing that you think businesses will look different? And then also, I am also an optimist. So do you have hope that we're gonna get through this? And if so, do you have any thoughts about that?
I am an optimist as well. We will get through this. We absolutely will. And I think there will be some really amazing things that come out of this pandemic. I think collaboration and, Darlene and I are serving on a collaborative force to help feed seniors. And it's really amazing. The YMCA, everyone just joined together, and I see we're all leveraging our resources to solve problems. And I think that's great. And I hope that continues. So often we get inside our four walls of our business and we don't look outside of it. And we don't look, we think of other people or other entities as competition and not as collaborators. And I think that that's shifting right now. And I hope that's a shift that continues. I think that from a workforce standpoint, we've learned how to telecommute. And I think in the traditional business sense, so many people were apprehensive to allowing their employees to work remotely. And I know that me personally, I was on the hamster wheel. I was just going, driving in traffic every day, 45 minutes one way to the other. And I'm actually much more productive when I wake up in the morning and start my day off. And so I think that will help with the traffic issues, some of the traffic issues in Los Angeles. I think it helps with morale in your teams, allowing them to telecommute. I think we've all had to upgrade our technology in some way, shape, or form, and that's something that we'll be able to continue to utilize. So I think there's some really positive things that will come from this. And I'm very hopeful that we will begin to recover for us and in the LAX area. When people start traveling again is when we will really start to see recovery in our area, because we're so dependent on hospitality and aviation. So that for me is something that's going to be very critical. And I think that we all could use a vacation somewhere right now. So those are my comments.
I'll go next. So in regards to the first part of, how will businesses look different, I think we're going to see greater emphasis on human-centered design. So meaning like putting humans first, and especially the health and safety of everyone. And that can look like a lot of different ways, but considering workers, partners, suppliers, and customers is so important. And I think a common theme that Fred and I have is optimism. And our current president in Rotary always says optimism is an ethical duty, and without it, we cannot impact positive change. So every time some news comes out and new challenges comes out, I always make sure to look at the silver linings in things and the opportunities within that, so that we can inspire the next generation and positive change in our communities.
Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. I think coming out of this, I think something that connects what we've all been talking about is an increased sense of the commons, you know, mutual aid, public space, whether it's things like, the curbside dining programs, or looking at municipal broadband in more depth, but things that, seeing the business community as a community and as part of the community, that what we have in common is good for all of us. And that's how we're getting through it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would echo all of that and say that, that we have out of this moment, if we're able to galvanize business, arts, education, all our constituents together with city government as a unifier, as a sort of as a guiding hand, creating conversation, listening in, learning from the conversation, picking up ideas, bringing Culver City together in a really cohesive way in this moment would set us up so well for, when this pandemic will end, we will move past this. But we can do so together, and we can do so in a way that we'll be mindful of the fact that, as Christina said, there's going to be broad scale implication changes on how people work. The day of the large office may never come back in the same way it was before. It's probably a good thing for a lot of different reasons. We've been so heavy in building commercial, I joke, but it's kind of true. We never saw a commercial building we didn't want to approve. So we've got all this commercial real estate. But is it built for long-term resiliency, flexibility? What are we going to do with it when it's not as fully utilized? What's our restaurant and hospitality and retail sector going to do when there might not be, the 3,000 Amazon employees wandering the streets downtown every day? It might be half that. Fundamental challenges, but fundamental opportunity to come together and help solve them together. And I think that's the opportunity we have today, so that whatever happy accident brought our creative economy together in the 90s, early 2000s, we can now do in a far more intentional, cohesive, transparent fashion going forward, and really become a model. And I'll just end on this note. We're doing a lot of work with with an organization called CPG, which is one of the consultants working on our general plan. And their focus, cultural planning group, is all about creative economy and creative infrastructure and all of that. They also recognize that of all the cities they've worked with in California and across the country, we have a very unique opportunity in Culver City to do something of great long-term impact and importance. With the right council, with the right city outlook, we can make 2020, 2021 a building a very strong foundation for us. And I hope we do it.
Thank you all. Like I said earlier, change is really in the air, significant change. And we are in the process of reimagining, I think, our whole society. So thank you so much for talking about small businesses and the creative economy, about bringing people together, to rely on each other, to see our common humanity, and how we need each other to build a better city, a better society. And when that happens, we are stronger, we are more prolific, and we create more. So I want to thank you, Christina, Darlene, Len, and Jeff, for engaging in this conversation. And thank you so much to everyone who watched, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. All right, have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Freddie.
Thank you.